Hey guys, Ryan here from Hooktheory.com, and welcome back to our songwriting series where we are writing a song from start to finish from scratch in Hookpad. This is part 3. If you guys haven't seen parts 1 and 2, I would definitely recommend that you guys check that out at the links below. In part 1, we started off with our chord progression. In part 2, we did our melody. Originally, I wanted to finish this up in part 3, but we got a lot to cover, so I think we actually need to do 2 more parts. Unfortunately, at part 3, what we're going to talk about is basically, now that we have our song, what notes do our instruments play? Kind of arranging our songs on instruments. And then part 4, we're going to do the production side. So getting this into our DAW and recording our sax and making this into a real song. Okay, so as always, if you guys want to follow along on Hookpad, you can do so at the second link below. And let's get started. Okay, so let's start by reminding ourselves where we are. So we have our song here loaded up in Hookpad, and I'm just going to play this for you guys so you can remember what we've done so far. All right, so let's have a quick discussion about key. This is something that doesn't really come up when we're writing the song, but it definitely comes up when we're trying to put this onto real instruments. So there's really 2 reasons that you choose a particular key. The first one has to do with range, and the second has to do with playability on an instrument. So let's talk about range first. Okay, so our melody is going to be played on a tenor saxophone, but if your melody is going to be sung by a vocalist, the range is definitely going to be an issue. So if we take a look at our song, it looks like the lowest note is this low scale degree 5, which corresponds to this G. And the highest note appears to be this E here, which is, a little over an octave and a half above the G. So we go from low G to this high E here. Okay, so say we're writing a melody and our vocalist, he or she says, well, my range is basically from a C to, around an A. So this is kind of like a mezzo-soprano range. And we say, okay, well, if we look at our piece, our piece goes from G to E, and your range is from C to A, so they're not going to be able to sing this melody. So what we want to do is we essentially want to shift our entire melody up 4 steps. So this is one reason why we might change the key of our song. So instead of going from G to E, we can change the key up 4 steps. So from C major, I'm going to go to F major. And now our low scale degree 5 is a C, and our high scale degree 3 is an A. So now this matches the range of our singer, and everything's good. Okay, so that's the first reason that you would change the key to the song. The second reason has to do with playability on an instrument. So in general, keys that sit on the top half of this circle of keys here are going to be easier to play than the bottom half. Now, some people are just really good at their instruments, and they'll tell you, I can play in any key. Just give me the music, and I'll work it out. And that's certainly true. But I'll tell people, for instance, that I can play in any key, but secretly I prefer to play in the keys up here. This is a little less true for guitarists to some degree, because once you have to start barring chords, then it kind of does, as long as you're familiar with all the keys, then a bar is kind of a bar. However, on wind instruments, like, for instance, this is supposed to be for a tenor saxophone, really the first key that people learn is the key of C. So they're gonna be most familiar with the key of C. As you move down this key wheel along this direction or along this direction, what happens is you start adding more sharps or flats to the notes in your scale. So for instance, in the key of C, you can see we have our notes are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, with no sharps or flats. As I start moving down, I go to A flat. Now I have 4 flats: A flat, B flat, D flat, E flat. If I go down to F sharp, this actually has 6 sharps, so it just gets a little more complicated. One other thing that we need to be careful about, because we're writing for a tenor saxophone, is that not all instruments are in the key of C. So what does that mean? What that means is if I go to my guitar friend and I say, hey, play a C for me, and he or she plays a C, then a C actually comes out. Now, you think that that seems fairly obvious, but if I go to my trumpet friend and I ask him to play a C, when they play a C, a B flat actually comes out. That's because the trumpet, along with the tenor saxophone, a clarinet, and the soprano sax, are all in the key of B flat. Okay, so again, when you're in the key of B flat, what that means is when you play a C on the instrument, a B flat actually comes out. So it's one step lower. If you play a G on the instrument, an F comes out. So this isn't something that they think about when they play. It's just something that we as music writers need to be conscious of. Even worse than that is that certain instruments are in the key of E flat. For instance, a bari sax and an alto sax are in the key of E flat, which means that when they play a C on their instrument, an E flat actually sounds. So I don't have a comprehensive list of all the instruments here. There's quite a few more instruments that don't play in the key of C, but this is just kind of an example here. Most of the instruments you're going to be using in, say, like a jazz combo like us, like piano, bass, these are all going to be in the key of C. Guitars, bass guitars, they're all in the key of C, so we don't have this problem. So what does that mean? What that means is that if we're picking a key for the purpose of playability on an instrument, we need to take into account the key of the instrument. So we take a look at our key wheel here. Essentially what happens is the tenor saxophone, which is in the key of B flat, will always play 2 keys to the left of what's written. So if it's written in C, what's actually going to come out is B flat. If it's written in G, what's actually going to come out is F. So if we want the tenor saxophone to play in the key of C, we actually have to give them music in D to make it to go 2 keys down to C. Okay, so whatever key we pick, the music that's going to be written on the page for the tenor saxophone needs to be 2 keys to the right. Okay, so what does that mean practically? That means practically, well, say we're thinking, okay, we'll put our song in D because, well, that's only, that's 2 sharps here, C sharp and F sharp. That seems reasonable. Remember that if you have a tenor saxophone playing, they're not going to be playing in D. They're going to be playing in E, which is actually 4 sharps. And if you have an alto saxophone or a bari saxophone that's in the key of E flat, they actually have to go 3 keys to the right. So 1, 2, 3. So when you're playing your nice song in D major, the poor alto saxophone is going to have 5 sharps. Okay, so for our piece, what we're actually going to do is we're going to pick the key of E flat. So if we're in the key of E flat, what key does the tenor saxophone play in? Remember, they play 2 keys to the right, so they're going to be playing in F. So the reason why we're going to pick E flat is that if they play in the key of F, it turns out that for tenor saxophone, this C is like a pretty low note, so I'm a little hesitant to push the C any lower. The C is kind of at the bottom of their range, so this is a good note to start the piece on. Okay, so let's take this and export this to sheet music. And okay, now we have some sheet music to give our tenor saxophone. So let's talk about the rest of this piece. So the tenor saxophone, along with some other wind instruments like trumpet, clarinet, etc., those instruments are kind of hard to emulate in a DAW. But instruments like drums and piano and bass are actually a lot easier. So for this project, what we're going to do is, although we're going to get like a real person to play the tenor saxophone, I'm going to show you basically how to fake the rest of the instruments. So I know that faking instruments in a DAW is not great for for musicians, but as songwriters who may not have a budget or access to musicians, it's actually a great tool. So let's talk about the bass part first. What I'm going to do is create a new voice, and then I'm going to open up the mix tool, and for our new voice, I'm going to actually drop this an octave. So now, when I put in, say, like a scale degree 1, it sounds an octave lower than it's written here. So a bass player can basically take a look at these chords and come up with a bass line to play. But I'm not a bass player, and I'm going to assume that you're not a bass player. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to write just a simple bass line. So the bass player is playing, obviously, the bass. So they're generally going to be the lowest notes out of all of the notes being played. And what that means is that it's important that the bass player be playing the notes that are defining these chords. So for instance, we have a 1-7 here, then it's going to be a good idea for the bass player at some point to be playing a 1, because that's what's defining this chord. So a super easy place for us to start is let's just give the bass a very boring melody, which is basically these 2 beat notes that just follow the bass line of the chords. Okay, so we have 1-1-1-1, and then 5-7-4, remember, has a 1 on the bass. You can tell because it's the same color, right? So we got 1s there, we'll do some 4s, 3, 2 sharp. I use the period key as a hotkey there to get the 2 to raise a half step. 2, 5, and then I'm going to copy this, paste it over again. Now we have 5s here. And then finally, let's do a 6 flat. And again, I use the hotkey comma this time to lower the 6 into a 6 flat. And we'll put this down an octave. Now, because the bass player is defining these chords, because they're the lowest note of the chord, does that mean that the bass always has to play the note that is on the root of the chord? And the answer is no. So you should generally kind of center your bass line around the note that is defined by the base of the chord, but it doesn't mean you have to exclusively play it. So if you don't play just the bass of the chord, what other notes could you play? Well, a good start is to play notes that are stable in the chord. And a very, very common one is essentially what we would call the 5th of the chord. So it's the note that's 5 notes above the bass. So a very common melody for bass might do something like this. 1, 5, 1, 5. Okay, so let's look at this 4 chord. So what's the 5th of the 4 chord? Well, it's the note that's 5 notes above the bass. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, right? Okay. All right. Now, it doesn't actually matter whether you go up or down. So for instance, we could go down to the 1 here. Let's do that here too. Typically what you want to do is kind of keep these around in the same range. I mean, you don't have to do that, but sometimes that's kind of nice. These notes kind of happen faster, so we don't really have to do anything fancy here. And why don't I actually just copy this down here. Okay, so let's hear how this sounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the mix tool. And typically when you're doing like a jazz combo piece like this, you don't need the piano to be playing the bass because that's what the bass player is doing. Okay, that's actually what the bass player is for, and it's a little redundant. So typically, what we like to do is I'm going to get rid of the piano bass. So let's mute this. And so right now, voice 2, that's our bass player. And for harmony, instead of playing quarter notes, I'm just going to have this play whole notes. So we'll select piano like this. Okay, so let's hear a little bit of this. Okay, so you guys get the basic idea. So it's pretty good, right? Okay, so what are some other things we can do to kind of spice up this bass line? So we're not going to take this super far because people study this for years to figure out how to write good bass lines, and we just want something kind of simple. But there's a couple of other things that you guys can think about when you're writing your bass lines. So the bass's primary job is to be defining the harmony, but the bass is an instrument as well, and so this is really a melody. And as many bass players will tell you, that oftentimes the bass melody can be a little boring. So one thing that we can try to do is to bring some melodic aspects to our bass melody. So what are some examples of this? So typically when you think of a melody, you don't think of melodies kind of popping around with large gaps all the time, right? I mean, if you take a look at our tenor sax melody, we're not doing lots of big jumps all the time. We're connecting our notes, right? And we can do that with our bass too. Okay, so for instance, let's take a look at this 5/7 chord here. So instead of going 1, 5, 4, what we can do is we can use maybe some one beat notes. So why don't I split this up, and we can kind of walk this up to the 5. So for instance, we can go 1, 2, 3, 5. So that sounds like this. So it still kind of serves the same purpose, right? We're still hitting this 1, which is defining this chord, and we're still going up to the 5, but we're just kind of doing it in a more interesting way. This is sometimes known as a walking bass. Okay, so let's hear the difference. We can go up to this example, for instance. So this is just 1, 5. And let's do our walking bass. Right, so it's subtly different, but it gives it kind of a nice little line here. Okay, so what else can we do? Another thing we can do is we can just generally add a few more notes here and there. So for instance, like this 2-beat note on the 4, this is kind of a nice little descending line, 3, 2 sharp, 2. So what we could do is, well, this isn't super interesting, but let's just say we made this a 4. Okay, so basically now we kind of set this up a little earlier. So instead of going like this, we can do this. So this is kind of nice because basically we've been using these kind of 8 beat groups, on the 1/7, 5/7/4, 4/7, and now remember our progression is accelerating. Now we're changing the harmony every 2 beats, and so kind of starting this descending line a little early gives this a little bit of momentum. We kind of gain some momentum into this this progression here. Okay, why don't we actually do that here too? pretty nice. Okay, so I think that's probably good for our bass line for now. Like I said, there's always little things that you can do to improve this, but we're just looking for something simple, and this will certainly serve our purposes. Okay, so there's one last thing that we got to do before we can throw this into Logic. I know you guys are eager to hear some real music, but we're just going to spend a little bit of time on the piano part, and this will be pretty simple. So this is, kind of a jazz combo piece. And the role of the piano in this ensemble is certainly not to be front and center, right? I mean, our tenor saxophone is really taking the melody. The bass player is really responsible for defining, obviously, the bass and part of the harmony. The keyboard is going to kind of fill in this harmony. It's going to fill in the quality of these chords. But we should really, it's the role is not to be banging this harmony out. It should be really kind of subtle and in the background. And oftentimes we'll be holding these chords for a long time. Okay, so does that mean that we just kind of play whole notes on every measure? Not necessarily, right? Because that would be kind of boring. But we certainly don't want to take away from the saxophone, and we don't want to overcrowd the bass. So one way that people like to do this is while you're not hitting these chords super frequently, you can give them a little bit of rhythm just to kind of make the part interesting, but not front and center. And one good way to do this is that you don't always hit the chord right at the beginning of the measure. For instance, I'm going to use the slash key here, and I can kind of split this. So say we hit the chord here. What we could do is we could say not hit the chord here. So I'll make this a rest. We can kind of hit a short one, kind of a short light tap here, and then do another rest, and then hit it again. So this is kind of like a common rhythm for kind of an accompaniment piano. So what we're doing is we're kind of introducing this kind of rhythmic aspect. We're hitting these chords not on primary beats, they're kind of on the off beats. This is known as syncopation. And it kind of makes this a little interesting without kind of dominating the piece. Another thing we can do is we could just, for instance, like this chord, 5, 7, and 4, we could just rest and then hit it and hold. We don't have to do this this little short chord right here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of insert little rhythmic ideas like this throughout the piece. So we'll do kind of like a short and a long chord here. Here we'll maybe we'll wait a beat and then hit it on 2. Just for diversity, maybe we'll make this one syncopated. We could do this here, but there's some, we already have some kind of harmonic momentum here, so this is probably fine. And then maybe I'll just copy this idea here and copy this idea here. Maybe we'll hit this one a little late like this. Then maybe put in a little rest here. And then let's just change it up, and this time we'll kind of hit these guys on the offbeats. So I'll make these rests. Okay, so before we finish, let's hear a little bit of this. Okay, so it's not bad. It's a decent start. In our next part, we will be recording our saxophone, doing a little bit of production, and we're going to wrap this thing up. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for part 4.